You believed that spiritual awakening would be the end of pain, that by opening your eyes to the truth, all heaviness would disappear, as if awareness were a medicine capable of erasing old scars. But Rumi reminds us, the wound is the place where the light enters you, and what no one tells you is that when that light finally breaks through, it can burn brighter than any shadow ever has. It's not the end of the pain. It's the beginning of a truth so deep, so raw, it can no longer be ignored. Have you ever felt this? That moment when you think you've finally set yourself free, but suddenly your heart throbs as if it's being ripped open again? This is awakening. It doesn't arrive with promises of an immediate inner paradise. It comes like a silent earthquake, tearing down the walls you've built to protect yourself and exposing what's hidden beneath. Perhaps you thought becoming conscious would be like basking in the sun after years of being in the cold. But in reality, it's like opening your eyes to a bright light after a long time in the dark. It blinds before it reveals. The truth hurts because it tears away masks. And masks, even heavy ones, always seemed safer than the nakedness of the soul. Do you feel it now? That uneasiness, that tightness in your chest, that mixture of fear and relief? It's no wonder. Spiritual awakening isn't a destination, it's a calling. It doesn't hand you a perfect life, it hands you life as it is, naked, unfiltered, without the illusions you used to numb yourself. That's why it hurts. Because when the anesthesia wears off, you feel everything. The love, the fear, the loss, the emptiness. Rumi didn't speak of a gentle path. He spoke of diving into one's own wound. He spoke of breaking one's heart until it bursts open. But what does opening one's heart mean? It means letting it breathe truth, even if it costs tears. It means looking at every piece of you that has been forgotten, ignored, rejected. And that's not romantic. That's intense. That's real. You can try to avoid it, you can try to run away, but awakening isn't something you control. It's something that finds you. Maybe you thought pain was a sign of failure, but what if it's the sign that you're finally looking where you belong? What if that pain is your body, mind, and soul telling you, now it's time to see? Think about how many years you spent adapting, trying to please, carrying expectations that weren't yours. Think about how many times you ignored your inner voice to avoid conflict. Awakening is the moment when that voice stops whispering and starts shouting, and you can no longer pretend you didn't hear it. It's not comfortable. It's not pretty at first. It's like coming home after years and finding the place dusty, broken with cracked walls. But still, it's your home, and you realize that no matter how much work it takes, it's where you were always meant to be. This is the truth that burns before it heals. And it's at this point that many people give up, because they expected flowers and received thorns. They expected rest and received inner work. They expected immediate peace and received silence. A silence so profound it seems overwhelming. But it's in this silence that the soul begins to speak. You may be feeling it right now. A discomfort you can't explain. A strange feeling that you're about to discover something that will change everything. This is it. It's the beginning of truth. A truth that doesn't ask for permission to enter, that doesn't apologize for hurting. A truth that isn't sweet at first, but is liberating in the end. And before we continue, I want you to take a deep breath and ask yourself, how many times have you tried to convince yourself that you were already healed, when in reality, you had only learned to live with the pain? How many times have you called peace what was merely an escape? Awakening will force you to answer these questions, and it will force you to choose. Continue living in the comfort of illusions or walk through the fire of truth, because deep down, you already know. Pain was never the enemy. It was always the invitation. And that's precisely why this moment is so important for you, because it's not enough to hear these words as if they were just another beautiful reflection among so many that have already passed through your feed. This content isn't here to be just a breath of temporary relief. It's here to poke at that part of your soul you've been avoiding facing. If you truly want to go through the awakening, if you want to understand that it's not the end of pain but the beginning of truth, then every sentence you've heard so far needs to be felt, not just heard. So I want you to tell me in the comments, which part of this video spoke most strongly to your soul right? Even if it's just a single sentence. This is your moment to express yourself, to record your truth. Because when you share, you not only connect with others who are going through the same thing, but you also reinforce to yourself that you're ready to move forward. And if this video has touched you in any way, If it brought to light something that was dormant, then don't forget to leave your like. This isn't just a gesture of support for the channel. It's a way of saying, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm living this. Every like, every comment, and every subscription is what keeps this space alive, which allows more people to find these messages and feel less alone on their journey. Sign up now and activate the bell, because this conversation doesn't end here. We're just getting started. And the next step will take you even deeper into understanding what it means to move through pain and toward your innermost truth. You believed with all your heart that when the moment of spiritual awakening arrived, that old weight would finally dissolve, that the emotional wounds you carried like invisible scars would stop throbbing, that, upon crossing the portal of consciousness, the silence that followed would be one of peace. But it wasn't, because after awakening, you discovered something no one told you. The pain hasn't gone away. It's still there. And perhaps for the first time you feel it with all its intensity. It's as if before it was hidden beneath layers of distractions and now it's naked, exposed, begging to be seen. Have you ever experienced that moment when you feel like you've taken the right step, that you're finally on the right path, but still there's an emptiness that won't go away? It's as if the soul has been waiting for something great at the end of the road, but when it gets there, all it finds is a mirror. And in that mirror there are no magical promises, no immediate rewards. There's just you, with everything you've tried to hide from yourself. This is the invisible problem that almost no one talks about. Society paints awakening as a golden destiny, but fails to mention that in reality it's the beginning of a profound and often uncomfortable process. It's like waking up in a completely messy room. While you were asleep, you didn't see the mess. But now that you're awake, you can no longer ignore it. The mess was always there. What's changed is your ability to see it. What's most frightening is realizing that awakening doesn't eliminate the pain. It amplifies it, because now you're no longer numb. Every memory, every loss, every unhealed wound appears before you clearly. There's no going back to sleep. There's no pretending not to see. And it's at this point that many begin to question whether it's really worth it. Maybe you've felt this recently. Maybe you've looked in the mirror and asked yourself, if I've already awakened, why does it still hurt so much? The answer is harsh, but necessary, because awakening isn't about avoiding pain. It's about moving through it. Before, you were running from it. Now it sits before you, staring into your eyes, begging to be heard. Do you see how this changes everything? Before, pain felt like something that happened to you. Now, it feels like a part of you. And that's where the real work begins. Because it's no longer about finding a way to erase what you feel, but about understanding why you feel it, where this emptiness comes from, what it's trying to show you. It's the moment you begin to realize that pain is a messenger, and that however uncomfortable it may be, it carries truths that can free your soul. But this process isn't linear. Some days, you feel clarity. Other days, everything seems to return to the same dark place from which you started. It's like walking through a desert where, with each step, you encounter fragments of your own story. Some of these fragments bring memories of love and beauty. Others carry memories of rejection, abandonment, and loneliness, and you need to look at them all. You can't choose only the ones that comfort you. Perhaps this is why many, upon awakening, feel more vulnerable than ever. Because sensitivity heightens. You perceive nuances you didn't see before. Words carry more weight. Silence speaks louder. Someone's absence becomes a scream. The presence of certain truths is almost unbearable. The invisible problem is that no one prepares for this part. No one tells you that upon awakening, you not only see the world more clearly, but also feel everything more deeply. And that includes pain. It includes that silent sadness that appears without warning. It includes that feeling of being out of place, as if you no longer belong where you once belonged. And yet, even with all this weight, something inside you knows there's no turning back. Because even with the pain, there's something true about this path. It's as if, for the first time, you're experiencing life as it is. Raw, imperfect, but real. And truth, even when it hurts, has a different flavor. A flavor the soul recognizes. As you listen to this, you might be recalling recent moments when this feeling surfaced. Moments when you felt your chest tighten for no apparent reason. When you looked around and realized nothing seemed to fit. That's what we're talking about. It's that discomfort that indicates something inside you is moving, even if slowly. And before we go any deeper into this journey, I want you to do something simple but powerful. Write in the comments, "I feel the truth." It's not just a loose phrase. It's a way of admitting to yourself that you recognize what's happening inside you. It's your silent commitment to your own process, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it doesn't yet make complete sense. Because this is the seed that will lead us to the next step. The pain hasn't disappeared because it was never an accidental obstacle, never a mistake that needed to be corrected or erased. It is the path itself. No matter how much your mind tries to deny it, something inside you knows that without it you might never have awakened. Rumi said, "Keep breaking your heart until it opens," and this is the part almost no one wants to hear. Because deep down, we all seek immediate relief. The feeling that we've already gotten through the difficult phase and now it's time to enjoy the light. But the truth is, the light doesn't arrive comfortably. It's not a warm embrace, it's a flash that pierces your defenses, exposing every shadow you've tried to bury. What hurts now isn't just what you've experienced, not just the memories of the past. What hurts is the truth you've spent years avoiding. It's that internal conversation you've put off, the decision you didn't have the courage to make, the reality you preferred to cover with more pleasant stories. When awakening happens, all these truths come to the surface and there's no longer any escape. You find yourself faced with a clarity that cannot be undone. It's as if, throughout your life, you've built layers of protection, justifications, excuses, narratives. Some even seemed wise. Others were just survival mechanisms. But now, faced with the truth, all those layers begin to shatter. And each time one of them falls, you feel as if a part of you is being ripped away. It's not easy. It's painful because you're letting go of versions of yourself that for so long were the only way to keep you going. This is the spiritual root that few have the courage to face. The understanding that pain is not just a symptom, it is the teacher. It is the signal that something deep is demanding entry. You can try to ignore it, you can try to distract yourself, but it always finds a way to return. Because pain, in awakening, is insistent. It knows that the only way to free yourself is by going through it, not around it. Perhaps right now you're remembering situations where you felt this invisible force pushing you to look at what you were avoiding. It could have been the end of a relationship, the loss of someone, a disappointment that left you feeling shattered. These experiences didn't come to destroy you, even if it seemed that way. They came to break what needed to be broken. Because only a heart that allows itself to be open can truly experience life. The curious thing is that, when we're trapped in illusion, we think we already know who we are. We create an identity based on what we can bear and what we choose to show. But the spiritual root of awakening is precisely dismantling this. It's stripping away everything that's non-essential, and this inevitably involves pain. Because letting go of illusions is like pulling out thorns that, so old, have become one with your own skin. Often, this pain is silent. It doesn't scream, but it gnaws at you from within. It shows up in the little things, in the eyes you avoid, in the words you swallow, in the choices you know don't reflect your truth. It's there when you feel like you're living on autopilot, when you realize you're surviving but not living. This is the call. It's the voice of your soul telling you it's time to stop running. And there is no awakening without this confrontation, because consciousness is not a peaceful state from the start. It is turbulent. It forces you to revisit memories you swore you'd never face again. It brings up internal conversations you've tried to silence, and the more you try to resist, the more painful it becomes. It's like swimming against the current. The moment you decide to surrender is not the moment the pain ends, but the moment it begins to transform. The spiritual root is raw. It doesn't ask for your opinion. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It simply happens. And when it does, it begins to change everything. The way you see people, the way you understand relationships, the way you look at yourself. It tears away the veil and reveals the structure that has always been behind your choices and patterns. It's at this point that you begin to understand that pain is actually a portal. And portals aren't comfortable, but they lead to places you've never been. If you're listening to this and feeling like every word speaks directly to your story, perhaps it's because you're already standing before that portal. Perhaps you've already begun to cross it. And before we move on to the next part, I want you to leave a comment. I go through the portal, not just to interact, but to register here and now that you recognize what's happening inside you. This is the first step toward the next dive we'll take together. What no one told you, and perhaps until now you haven't had the courage to admit to yourself, is that awakening isn't anesthesia. On the contrary, it's amplification. It's as if all the sounds, all the colors, and all the feelings that were previously muffled suddenly gain intensity. Sadness doesn't disappear, it deepens. Joy isn't constant, but when it comes, it's more real. Love isn't just a pretty word. It's a force that exposes your most intimate vulnerabilities. And pain. Pain becomes impossible to ignore. Awakening doesn't erase the shadows. It turns on a light so bright that you see every detail. You begin to see what was previously hidden. Things that seem normal begin to bother you. Conversations that once went unnoticed now seem superficial. Relationships you once maintained out of habit begin to show the fragility of their foundations. There's an inevitable stripping bare. And this is the scary part. It's not just the world revealing itself. It's you revealing yourself. It's seeing clearly where you sabotaged yourself, where you accepted less than you deserved, where you hid to avoid facing the truth. At this point, many wonder if they're becoming more fragile. But awakening isn't about fragility. It's about heightened sensitivity. It's as if you've lived your entire life wearing heavy armor, and now that you've taken it off, you feel the cold wind and the heat of the sun raw. This can hurt, because you were used to living protected. But the armor, while providing security, also prevented the touch of life. Acceptance is not giving up. That's the hidden key so many seek, but few understand. The mind trained in survival logic associates acceptance with weakness, as if acceptance were conformity. But spiritually, acceptance is an act of strength. It's allowing the truth to pass through you without destroying who you are. It's letting the wave wash over you even if it drags away memories, guilt, and fears. It's trusting that when the tide recedes, you'll still be here, more whole than before. Many avoid this surrender because they believe that if they open themselves up to feeling everything, they'll be swallowed by pain. But the paradox is that pain only persists when you resist going through it. The more you fight it, the stronger it grows. It's like being stuck in quicksand. The instinct is to struggle, but that's precisely what sinks you. When you stop fighting the experience and decide to move through it with presence, something changes. Pain stops being an enemy and becomes a guide. Awakening is a constant invitation to this surrender. It's as if the universe is saying, "You're ready to see it all. Now, what are you going to do with it?" This silent question echoes within you, and the answer doesn't come all at once. It comes in the moments when you choose not to run away, when you decide to stay in the uncomfortable conversation with yourself, when you look in the mirror and don't look away. And the hidden key isn't in finding ready-made answers, but in cultivating the courage to ask the right questions. Questions like, what is this pain trying to show me? Or, what part of me is being called to awaken now? It's in this process of questioning that acceptance takes hold, not as passivity, but as alignment with something greater. Perhaps right now, you're remembering a moment when everything inside you wanted to escape, but something deeper made you stay. And by staying, you realized that the pain didn't destroy you. On the contrary, it showed you that you were capable of enduring much more than you imagined. This is the silent alchemy that awakening promotes, transforming what once seemed unbearable into a space of inner expansion. But this requires attention, because when pain appears, the tendency is to fall back into old habits, seek distractions, and shut down again. The key is to notice these moments and choose differently. Choose to stay open. Choose to feel. Choose to trust that going through is more powerful than running away. And this crossing doesn't happen all at once. It repeats itself, in layers. Each time you think, now it's going to end, a new part of yourself emerges, begging to be examined. And that's when you understand that awakening isn't a single event, but an ongoing process. A process in which acceptance becomes the only solid ground beneath your feet. When you truly accept, you're not saying it's okay when it's not. You're saying, I see, I acknowledge, I don't run away. It's an internal stance that changes the way you walk, speak, love, and relate to the world. And this, more than any technique or knowledge, is what begins to heal from the inside out. If this part made sense to you, if you realize that there is something in your life asking to be crossed with courage, I want you to write in the comments, I choose to cross. It's not just about responding to this video, it's about recording the moment you decide to stop resisting and allow the truth, even if it hurts, to be the path that will shape you from now on. Perhaps, after a breakup, you felt like the ground had been ripped out from under you, and in an attempt to get back on your feet, you immersed yourself in self-discovery. You bought books, watched videos, started meditating, and wrote pages and pages in your journal. There was a silent hope within you. Now, yes, I'm going to heal. For a few weeks, it even seemed to work. You felt a lightness, as if life were returning to you. But then, without warning, the pain returned. It wasn't a discreet visit. It arrived with force, reclaiming the space in your chest, reminding you of things you thought you'd already overcome. And this is where many people get lost, thinking that this return of pain is a sign of failure, but it's not. The truth is, each time you open yourself to self-knowledge, deeper layers of yourself begin to reveal themselves, and each revelation requires mourning. Mourning for who you thought you were, mourning for the stories you told yourself to survive, mourning for the illusions that, though painful, gave you a sense of security. When you decided to heal, you may not have realized you were beginning a journey of multiple goodbyes. Not just goodbyes to people, but to identities, beliefs, and expectations. Because healing isn't linear, and awakening isn't a single event. It's a cyclical movement in which you move forward, face, understand, and then a new layer opens, demanding attention. Think of a relationship you knew deep down was over even before it officially ended. You felt the distance, you noticed the unspoken absences, but you clung to the hope that something might change. When the separation finally happened, you felt the obvious pain of loss. But after some time, you realized that the deeper pain came not just from the other person's absence, but from confronting reality. You remained in a place where there was no longer any truth, and this cost you parts of yourself. This is the kind of revelation awakening brings. It doesn't just illuminate wounds, it reveals the places where you yourself contributed to keeping them open. And when this truth emerges, there's no unseeing it. It hurts because it dismantles the narrative you've constructed to protect yourself. And each time one of these narratives collapses, there's mourning. This also happens in other aspects of life. Perhaps you invested years in a job believing it represented stability, purpose, and security, until the day you realized that, deep down, you were fading. And when you finally summoned the courage to leave, you felt not only fear of the unknown but also grief for all the years you lived away from your true self. Awakening in these cases is realizing that you've lost not just a job, but also parts of yourself that have been ignored for so long. Each concrete example of awakening carries with it a pattern. Pain is not a sign of regression, but of deepening. It's proof that you're going beyond the surface, that you're touching parts of your soul that have never had room to speak. And it's in this place that real transformation resides, not in the absence of pain, but in its reframing. Perhaps now you can remember a time when you thought you were okay again, but an event, sometimes a small one, opened an old wound. A song, a phrase, a smell, and suddenly you found yourself back in that emotional place. But realize, you weren't in the same place as before. You already had more awareness, more clarity, and even though it still hurt, there was something different. You weren't the same person who went through that pain the first time. This means that, even with repeating cycles, you're at a deeper level of understanding. This is a dynamic few explain. Healing often involves revisiting the same pain with a fresh perspective. It's realizing that there's no complete return to the past, but there are layers of it that still need to be honored and released. And for each layer, there's mourning, because each goodbye is also a part of your identity that dissolves. Awakening doesn't spare anyone from this process. It doesn't shield you from the truth, it amplifies it. It shows you with almost brutal clarity where you're deceiving yourself, where you're hiding, where you're still trapped in stories that no longer serve you. And if you have the courage to look at this without running away, you'll realize that each return of pain is actually an invitation to go deeper. As we speak, perhaps you're revisiting chapters of your life, remembering moments when you swore you were cured, only to discover there was more to explore. And if these memories are surfacing, it's not by chance. It's because there's something in them that still yearns to be acknowledged. So, before we move on to the next step of this journey, I want you to write in the comments, "I recognize my layers." It's not just a phrase. It's an act of presence, courage, and commitment to your own process. Because that's how healing happens. Layer by layer, revelation by revelation, until you no longer need to hide from yourself. You are not the pain. This sentence, which seems simple at first glance, is a breaking point for those in the midst of awakening, because for a long time, you believed that what you felt defined who you were. Sadness seemed to be your identity. Loss became your surname. Abandonment became part of your reflection in the mirror. But when you start to really look, you realize that the pain is not you. It's just an experience that crosses your path. It's not your essence. It's a visitor. Intense, yes, but fleeting. And there's enormous power in recognizing this, because the moment you stop identifying with the pain, you begin to see your own strength. You're not the emptiness you felt during sleepless nights, nor the anguish that gripped your chest when everything fell apart. You're the person who stood tall even when the wind seemed too strong. You're the one who dared to face what everyone told you to avoid. Rumi said, "Don't settle for stories of how things happened to others. Awaken your own legend." And this is a dangerous invitation for those who don't want to change, but liberating for those who decide to embrace their own path. Because awakening your own legend means breaking with the passivity of living by other people's narratives. It means stopping relying on versions of life that don't belong to you. It means having the courage to write a chapter that has never been written before, even if it means facing uncertainty. When you reach this shift in consciousness, something changes in the way you deal with pain. It stops being an obstacle and becomes a sign, a map. Every discomfort, every internal resistance, every memory that insists on returning, everything begins to be seen as a clue. It's no longer a punishment, it's a key that opens doors to parts of yourself you've never known before. And the most transformative thing is realizing that this strength was always there. It wasn't pain that created it. It was pain that revealed it. It's like fire that tests the strength of gold. You may have spent your life believing you couldn't handle certain things, but when they came, you pushed through. Maybe crying, shaking, thinking you couldn't handle it, but you pushed through. And it's in this silent act of continuing to walk that your own legend begins to be written. A shift in consciousness also means realizing that there's no end point to this process. There's no finish line where someone puts a medal around your neck and says, "Congratulations, now you're ready." Awakening is just the beginning. It's the opening of a door to a life where you live more awake, more consciously, more aligned with what truly matters. But this requires daily presence and constant commitment. And this is where many feel fear, because they understand that responsibility for their own lives now lies in their hands. Before, it was easy to blame the past, people, circumstances. Not anymore. Now you know that every choice you make either builds or destroys the path you're on. And this awareness is heavy for some, but for those who choose to live awake, it's liberating. Because along with the weight comes the clarity that you can decide. You can change. You can rebuild. Think about how many times you've believed you were trapped in a story you didn't choose. How many times you felt like you had no choice, that you were just a spectator in your own life. A shift in consciousness cuts that thread. It places the pen in your hand and says, "Write." And writing here isn't about creating a perfect story, but rather a true story, where you are whole, even if imperfect. And make no mistake, this doesn't mean the pain will disappear. It will continue to appear at unexpected moments. The difference is that now you know who you are when faced with it. You know that you are not what you feel, but the one who feels. And this realization changes everything, because when you understand this, you begin to walk more firmly, even on days when the ground seems shaky. Perhaps, as you listen to this, you're remembering situations where you felt powerless, but today, looking back, you realize you survived. And not only survived, you learned, grew, transformed. This is what it means to awaken your own legend. Not denying the pain, but using it as fuel to become more whole. And before we continue to the next part of this journey, I want you to write in the comments, "I awaken my legend." Not just to interact, but to affirm to yourself that you are embracing this shift in consciousness, that you are willing to stop living borrowed stories and start writing your own. Because from now on, every step you take will be a new chapter, and it can only be written by you. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you recognized every word, every silence, and every truth we shared in this video. This means you're ready to continue this journey with me, delving ever deeper into your awakening. So, before you go, join this community of souls seeking truth. Subscribe to the channel now, so you don't miss the next chapters of this journey. If this content touched your heart, leave a like, This helps more people find these words and feel the same way you did. The next video is already appearing on your screen. Click it and follow along, because what follows will further deepen what you've discovered today. Pain is not the end. It's the map to your soul.